Hi everybody, Brianna Whitney here, host of True Crime AZ Live. Thank you so much for joining us for another special show tonight, live in Tucson on day 12 of the search for Nancy Guthrie. I know we've been doing shows throughout the week, and I know a lot of you guys have been present for those, but Thursdays are typically the days that we do our big shows, and it only felt right that we stay here, bring on live experts with everything we've learned so far. I think if you'd asked us last week if we thought we'd still be here with the updates we've had, that answer probably would have been no, but this is a case that has been so exceptionally unusual from the start, and today learning new information since Nancy Guthrie disappeared from her Tucson home 12 days ago. I want to start with the big new information from the FBI tonight, including the fact that they have now doubled the reward for information that leads to Nancy herself or the arrest and conviction of the person or persons who abducted her. They have now increased that reward to $100,000 tonight. That is coming from the FBI. It was at $50,000 before, so that's a big update in terms of just trying to get in more tips. They've already been asking for tips just around the board, but now that really changes things. I also want to talk to you about kind of this suspect profile, this new description that the FBI was able to put out today, and PCSD, the Pima County Sheriff's Department, also sharing that as well. Let's talk about it. It's describing that man that we see in that chilling surveillance video, the person they believe abducted Nancy Guthrie. So this is what they put out tonight. They believe the suspect is a man, approximately 5'9" to 5'10" feet tall, average build. They also believe, this is important on the backpack, in the video he's wearing what they've identified as a black 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack backpack, and a lot of how they've been able to tell that was due to some of the description things on the backpack, but also the specific reflective stripes that are on the straps there. So that is new information tonight as well. Again, 5'9" to 5'10", a man. They believe he has an average build. You can kind of tell that from the video. They believe it's this black 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack, and you have to believe and assume that they are trying to track down maybe when that backpack was purchased and from where. I know that's something that they were kind of trying to figure out, were these items of clothing and things he had with him there, you know, the ski mask, the backpack, were they new? And if they were, can they track down when they were bought and where they were bought? So that is the new information today. Of course, if you have any information, call 1-800-CALL-FBI. They want to take your tips. And there's other ways you can submit tips as well. We're going to get into that here in just a second. Some other areas of note tonight. If you were paying attention to this story late into the night last night, there was somewhat of a big update in the case that there were black gloves, a pair of black gloves found around Nancy Guthrie's home area within that radius there, the neighborhood radius. Those are now in DNA testing. I was able to work with an inside source today and corroborate exactly where those gloves were found. They were found off of one of the main roadways near Nancy Guthrie's home, exactly 1.3 miles away from her home. But it is important to note kind of where it is in proximity to her home. The way that the roads go, there would only be a couple turns to take, and it's just south of where her home is if you were starting to go south into town. So the Catalina Foothills is more on the northern side of Tucson, but if you're heading towards downtown, towards South Tucson, that's where you would be going this direction as well. But it's so close that I think now you can pretty much assume that the FBI and the PCSD are looking at a possible route that the abductor would have taken either around the time of the abduction or afterwards. And so I believe that that's kind of adding to this new surveillance call for action that they've put out. Let's go over that. So we knew they've been asking for surveillance footage in the area, but now they're asking neighbors who live in a 2-mile radius of Nancy Guthrie to check your surveillance videos from just the beginning of this entire year. So January 1st, 2026. But one of those is January 11th between 9 p.m. and midnight. That is interesting because that is more than 2 weeks before Nancy Guthrie went missing. So there must be something of note that's making them believe that that January 11th time is really important. They're also wanting you to look at January 31st between 9:30 a.m. and 11 a.m. They flagged a suspicious vehicle in the area around 10 a.m. and that was according to an alert in the Ring doorbell app that neighbors have. So that's what they were kind of putting out there. But the PCSD is saying, just check your surveillance from this entire year at this point. And there's specific things they want you to look for, or they want people to look for. Vehicles, vehicle traffic, people/pedestrians, and anything neighbors would deem out of the ordinary or important to the investigation. That's what they want to know. Now, these tips that have been coming in. We know there are so many. As of yesterday, there were 18,000 tips that they had fielded. 4,000 of those had come in since the surveillance video. I've talked to people, they were having trouble being able to call in the tips. Those people I've talked to have since been able to get their tips submitted, but you can just tell the volume of calls is immense. They have now, the PCSD, Pima County Sheriff's Department, has put up a new evidence portal where you can upload video to, and that's online on our website and on their social media as well. So again, if you have any of those things, those videos that would show people, odd vehicles, somebody acting suspicious, all of that, you now can upload that to this new evidence portal. So that's exceptionally important tonight. We are at the Pima County Sheriff's Department. It's pretty quiet here. They have not had a press conference for an entire week now. But there's been a lot of action at Nancy Guthrie's home, just north of here in the Catalina Foothills. I want to take a live look at her home tonight. One of our photographers and reporters there, the crew is up there kind of monitoring that situation. That's a place that we saw a lot of activity earlier. Of course, it's a lot quieter tonight, just with media crews lined up. But it hasn't just been quiet at Nancy Guthrie's home. There's been quite a bit of activity that has been going on there throughout the several days. And the authorities told us that there would be. But we saw some new kind of tactics today. And for that, I want to bring in our first guest tonight, William Odom, a former FBI agent. William, I know you specialized in digital forensics for 27 years, and there's so much forensic activity in this case itself. So this is fantastic to have you on. I appreciate you joining us and just the expertise you can give us. So I want to start off with some of the video that we saw from outside Nancy Guthrie's home today. We saw the FBI bring in a tent. They were parked there with large boxes, black boxes with large pieces of equipment. And when we were zooming in on those, you could see that they said there was a photographic technologist that was part of this. So from your side of expertise, what were they doing there today?
Well, with all things forensic, it's a matter of securing the scene. So with the fact that they had a tent there, it's not surprising. That would be one way to secure the scene if they're looking to get advanced imagery, particularly if they're photographic technicians. They have the ability to perform analysis and gather photos and videos way above and beyond what the normal person might have. So the idea of that being there is really makes sense, because they can go back and say, okay, this scene, we need to secure that. We need to make sure that there's no interference from outside, from anything. And then from that, let's get, do some advanced imagery on this area, because that is a key area, and see what information comes back from that they can acquire.
And when you say advanced imagery, anybody can take a picture and kind of zoom in and sharpen it and try to glean from that what they can. When you say this kind of sharper imagery, what exactly can they do with it?
A 360-degree video, different types of photographs that get in different light spectrums, not just visible light. Anything that might give any clue, any other evidence that would not be visually obvious before. And, I know they've done a good job at collecting the evidence, but anything else that might show them something that they hadn't seen before in some other way.
Okay, that makes sense. I know you can specialize in surveillance video as well, obviously that being really the key piece of evidence in this case right now. But I found it interesting that they've not only widened the search for surveillance video, saying, hey, anybody in a 2-mile radius, start looking at your surveillance cameras, but they also have given this much greater timeline in terms of, let's just go back to the beginning of the year, but there has been specific dates that they gave as well. One of those was several weeks. I think that they're trying to almost piece together movements of which direction the abductor may have gone after, or why would they widen their search that far in terms of the area and then also the timeline from the beginning of 2026?
Most certainly they are trying to piece together what happened, and I think that there's a number of factors here that are still unknown, and certainly the FBI is withholding information for obvious reasons, but the amount of evidence that could potentially be gathered from these cameras is immeasurable. And the fact that there is so much evidence on ring cams, on Nest cams, on all of any camera, any surveillance video at any place, it would be just a huge bonus to be able to look through that. It may be that a majority of that is non-relevant at all, and that's fine, but you have to be able to look at that and see what's going on. In terms of the timing, again, as we know, unfortunately with Ms. Guthrie's cameras, they didn't have any length of recording, and that's why it took a while to get that information back to be able to show these videos in the first place. However, most people do have some sort of subscription or something like that they could go back and say, okay, we have all of this information. So it's a wide net, and it does take a lot of time to go through that information, but it helps to be able to see, okay, we see that there's somebody that looks like this person that's come in, or we see some activity that is unusual. Whatever the case may be, you need to be able to go back and say, all right, we've had a chance to look at this and see where that information leads us, and that helps build that picture, and it helps with that puzzle, because right now it still is very much a puzzle, and it has to be put together to make that the picture complete. And so hopefully by going back to that point, to the first of the year, that is a large net, but that shows that there's potential that somebody was had interaction before, that there was a lot of activity that was going on prior to the events that occurred the night that she was abducted. So I think the fact that they're spending that time going back through all of these dates is really showing that they're trying to put together a complete picture of what happened over time, and show that, yes, this was premeditated or something similar.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Just specifically with that January 11th, the date that's been flagged, can you almost certainly believe that the FBI and PCSD believes that this abductor had been in the area prior to, and that they have specific information that they're not sharing that would lead them to believe that?
It certainly looks that way, yes, I would agree.
Right. And so if they're able to get surveillance footage, the other question I have too is specific to the terrain of the neighborhood. Most of these houses are set far back on their lots and covered really in the front and on sides with a bunch of desert brush, cacti. It's hard to see. I mean, even just driving through the neighborhood, it's hard to even tell who has possible surveillance cameras, maybe Ring or Nest doorbell cameras, and who doesn't. If there's a grainy image, or it's dark and you can barely see, can the FBI enhance it enough to be able to actually get specifics out of that? Or do they need it to be a certain quality from the start, certain visibility from the start, for it to be useful?
Yeah, I mean, certainly it would help if it were, the great quality and the best cameras. But these are off-the-shelf cameras that they're good, and they have a good purpose. But so they're not going to be like the high-definition cameras that are going to be used like a spy satellite or something like that, obviously. However, to your question, yes, you can do some enhancement. There's other things that you can do as well. It's not so much like trying to focus in on something as to identify things that are not necessary or part of that picture, plants, animals, anything else that might be extraneous to this whole thing, and then say, okay, we see this sort of activity. That activity, even if it's for 2 seconds, is useful, because that shows something that was probably not normally going to be there anyway, unless somebody happened to be walking by, or somebody was doing something maybe that they shouldn't be. So even the fact that with all of this other extraneous data that's in there, yes, they can focus in on, at some level, to say, okay, we can find something here in some form or fashion that'll help put the pieces to that puzzle.
We've gotten several questions about this over the past couple of days. I'm hoping. Obviously, we know Nancy Guthrie did not have the subscription, and that's why it took some time to be able to recover that footage of the abductor at her front porch. But so many people have asked, well, if they could recover that footage, can't they recover the hour before that? Can't they recover when somebody might have pulled up? Can they also recover when Nancy got home and was reportedly dropped off by her son-in-law? Where is that video?
Well, the fact that she doesn't have a subscription does complicate matters quite a bit, because if she had that, it would be easy to go back and look at, through an app or through normal means to see what was happening there. The video itself, because she doesn't have a subscription, it's kept in a cloud environment in Google. and Google is the one that maintains that. So it's my understanding that they help quite a bit to recover this information. The answer to your question is, could they? Maybe it's possible, but frankly, Google is going to be the one that can answer that because they're the ones that are the key masters for that data. So if it is there, yes, they can get it, but again, they have to recover a lot of data because this is not data that's normally saved either. This is really to help with the normal process of some activity that's occurring, through your house or in real time. And it may be that you need to go back and they may be able to help you with that. But over time, and particularly over a couple of weeks or even a couple of months, it becomes harder and harder. And certainly they're not going to keep that data for an extended period of time. And they have a lot of data to be able to look through, not only for Ms. Guthrie's camera, but also for others that are in a similar situation. Hopefully they have the technology to be able to do that. Certainly they did because they were able to get this, but it's not an easy ask. It's not the needle in the haystack. It's really a needle in another pile of needles that they have to dig through.
You would assume, though, I mean, we've heard at least that all these companies, Ring, Google, and Nest, DoorDash, everyone's been cooperating. So, I mean, you'd have to think this would be the top priority. I mean, if they can recover it from minutes after, one would think, wouldn't they make this a top priority, whether it's hard or not? I mean, that could answer just even a little bit more of what still feels like a big part of the mystery, which is the minutes leading up to that person arriving on the front porch.
Correct. I would think that they are. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't. And certainly it sounds like they're cooperating, and that's been expedited by FBI involvement as well. But this is a lot of data. It is, terabytes or more of data that has to be sorted through. And that's really where that becomes the issue. It's not a matter of it not being a priority. It is, but you really have to dig through a lot of data points to get to something that's valuable. And fortunately, they were able to do that with the data that they provided yesterday. But yes, and I'm sure they're doing that now. But yes, it is going to take some time to get through that data just because of the volume.
Yeah. William Odom, I appreciate you so much for coming on and sharing your expertise
Thank
with
you.
us. I know we'll probably talk to you again in the coming days as this unfolds, but it's obviously complicated, and we're dealing with high technology and things that matter so much in this. So we have a lot of questions and from people too. So I appreciate you taking the time to answer that, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, guys, stay tuned after the break. We have a lot more live guests coming up, including more about who we're looking for, the type of characteristics we can see in that surveillance video, where the investigation stands, some of the criticism, what's going well, what is not going well, where this stands tonight, and then a live report from the scene coming up later tonight. We'll stick with you after the break. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us. Your questions, we're going to be addressing them here as the show continues on. But again, I just want to start and reiterate that new information we got from the FBI tonight, the suspect description, the person who is seen in that surveillance video, who we believe is Nancy Guthrie's abductor. Again tonight, the FBI saying they believe that he is 5'9" or 5'10", has an average build, and that the backpack he is wearing is a black 25-liter Ozark Trail Hiker backpack. A lot of that seen by what's on the backpack and the reflective strips that are on the straps. But again, 5'9" to 5'10", that's the kind of person that they are looking for. But there's a lot that we can tell from this surveillance video in and of itself in terms of just getting it out there. What does that really mean for how quickly this case could move, and what else can we tell from that video? I want to bring on Adam Scott Want, a professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York. Adam, thank you so much for joining us. I know you've been doing interviews with national networks across the country this week on everything, so I appreciate you joining us from the East Coast tonight.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Appreciate it. So of the new information we learned from the FBI today, specifically that they believe that this man, the abductor, is 5'9" or 5'10", how are they able to determine that exactly from the surveillance video?
When it comes to the surveillance video, it became pretty straightforward because of the arch around the entranceway of the door, as well as the tiles on the floor. It gave law enforcement a really easy metric to go and work with to be able to match up to understand his height within 1 inch.
Okay, so how would they be able to tell that archway height, though? I mean, I know you said that's kind of a characteristic there, but how can they do that in like a 2D video?
Well, what they're going to do is they're going to go out in person and they're going to measure it, right? So they're going to send techs out to measure the actual arch. And then from the imagery, they're going to do composite photos where they, match the arch in size along with different points of geometry in order to actually determine his height.
Okay, and so that's interesting because I don't think people know a lot about that. What else from the surveillance video can we tell? And I don't mean the obvious of just, oh, this is what their eyes look like and there might be a mustache, but is there certain characteristics in the video that you feel would really provide some details that people wouldn't necessarily be looking at the surveillance video that isn't obvious?
Most of the experts who have looked at this video, including myself, look at this video and say this is not a professional. This is more than likely an amateur who is not doing this professionally, doesn't know what they're doing. They are making a ton of mistakes in this video, from a backpack with reflective striping on it to, how they're outwardly wearing their semi-automatic gun as they walk up to the house. A seasoned professional kidnapper might not make many of these mistakes. On top of it, what really stands out to me is it's very possible that the kidnapper never scouted the home before they did the kidnapping. We think he probably would have driven by, and I think that there's a lot of evidence that I'm seeing that, more than likely the law enforcement believes he was in the area early. But what really strikes me is when he walks up to that door, I truly don't think he knew that there was a camera there. And when he saw the camera, he had to change his tactics. He didn't have spray paint or tape or anything to cover the camera. Went out to the outside and picked up vegetation to cover it. He was pivoting the plan quickly, and things obviously did not go as planned.
Interesting, though, if he didn't know the camera was there and he realizes I'm on camera and now they can see everything I'm doing, he did go to lengths to get the plants and then eventually disconnects that camera. But as well, they may already see me, but they won't at least see what's going to happen on the back end of this, which is the way that Nancy Guthrie was abducted.
That's a big possibility. There is a possibility that, the camera was destroyed. We know that it's missing. It's a possibility that he did that before he took his victim out of the home. But we also know that it's probably a good thing he destroyed the camera. There's a significant chance that the reason Google may have been able to recover these videos is because once the camera was destroyed, there were no other streams of data coming in overwriting the area where those files were kept. We don't know that for sure, but there's actually a significant forensic possibility that the destruction of the camera allowed us to retrieve these files later on.
Okay, so that's interesting. I hadn't heard that before either. So, I mean, what would have happened if the camera was still on, but he had covered it and everything, and there wasn't more? I mean, would we never have gotten this?
There's a possibility if he did not destroy the camera, the only retrievable images would have been that of law enforcement responding to the scene. They would have been, the latest images before they preserved or froze anything that they were able to do. This is a terrifically complicated case. As we know, the victim was not paying for the subscription, so they were not being saved in the user account. And this caused Google to have to go back and forensically analyze their drives in order to be able to get these files. And that is a very time-intensive task to undertake. And we are lucky that they were able to retrieve what they retrieved.
You and other people have said, this is not a seasoned criminal, this is an amateur. And I find it interesting that many of you experts have said that, because I'm shocked that somebody who is an amateur would not be caught now. I mean, you said he's made mistakes in that video, many of them, but here we are 12 days later and we still have no clues as to who that is. Like, we don't have a lead there that we know of, and we definitely don't know where Nancy is. So what is that line? What is that line between amateur and somebody who knows what they're doing?
As somebody who studies and participates in investigations, one of the first things that comes to mind is the amount of time this investigation is taking is appropriate and expected given the circumstances. I think that, we expect these quick resolutions, but law enforcement needs to go, canvass scenes, understand what electronic devices are around, what the universe of evidence is, and then they need to contact these companies and normally go back and forth with them many times in order to truly see what is available and what could be given back to law enforcement. The records are there. The government and law enforcement will get a hold of them, but that takes time. So this suspect could be somewhere laying low. I have no doubt that we will figure out who this is, and law enforcement will apprehend him in the near future.
And probably fairly quickly. That all kind of rests on the fact that there is this surveillance video. What are some cases, recent cases, that people know that surveillance video coming out has led to a pretty quick arrest? Like that was the key in the case.
I'm not going to go to quick because, again, quick isn't really, in these large profile cases, we're not seeing quick right now. We're seeing Brian Kohberger type of case, Luigi Mangione type of case. These large cases where law enforcement goes out and gets thousands, if not tens of thousands of videos that they need to analyze, it takes time. The data is there, the files are there. Law enforcement just needs to find out where they are, get a hold of them, analyze them. And somewhere along this line over the past month, there will be little digital breadcrumbs that the kidnapper could not control, no matter how professional or unprofessional they were. They're going to be a dash cam of an Uber that was driving down the road at the same time, or one of those types of situations. And when law enforcement gets the correct digital evidence, they will be able to add to their timeline, add to their information base, and eventually be able to identify a list of suspects, of which they will cut those lists down until hopefully they're able to identify the kidnapper.
And something that came to mind for me too was the recent Charlie Kirk fatal shooting. Once that video went out, you actually had the suspect, Tyler Robinson's parents, who identified him from the surveillance video and then, worked with authorities to turn him in from there. Is it also possible that it could be a family member or somebody close to this person who sees the surveillance and says it also becomes basically the break that can crack this case open?
Yeah, that needs to be looked at very carefully because we have a good enough video of this suspect and their gait and the way which is the way that they walk. We have a good enough view of their face in that someone out there without a shadow of a doubt is looking at this video thinking they know who it is. Those people should come forward even if they're uncomfortable, because if I knew this kidnapper personally, I would probably be able to recognize it from that video. So somewhere in America, there are people who could watch this video and know who it is, call in a tip, and help this process along.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking the same exact thing. If this were me and I knew that person, I'd recognize them immediately, even with a ski mask, dark clothing, the backpack. That's exactly right. Adam, I appreciate you so much for coming on our show, especially it's late for you on the East Coast, but thank you so much for your expertise as we kind of, go through this case as it unfolds in rapid time, in real time, and we'll stay with you in the coming days as this continues with updates. So appreciate your expertise tonight.
You're most welcome. I look forward to watching your future reporting on this.
Thank you so much. All right, guys, coming up after the break, we're going to talk to a former Phoenix police sergeant who deals with extortion kidnappings about the actual investigation itself, not just the surveillance video, but everything else that we've learned with where the investigation stands with the FBI, with the Pima County Sheriff's Department, what's going well and what's not. We'll break that all down after the break. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us on day 12 of the Nancy Guthrie search. This is a great show in terms of just widespread analysis of where the case stands right now, especially with new information tonight about that suspect. They believe the abductor from the surveillance video, a new description of him, and then where the FBI stands tonight, including that new $100,000 reward. But I know it's been so much information in a relatively short amount of time, and it feels like there's so many updates each day. It's honestly confusing and can be hard to keep up with. So I want to take us back through what we know to be the most important aspects of the timeline of this case since day one, and then we're going to bring on our next live guest. So come with me here as we go through the timeline of how this case went. Let's start with January 31st, 5:32 p.m. Nancy Guthrie travels to Annie's, her daughter's, by Uber to have dinner at the house. At 9:48 p.m., Nancy is dropped off at home, reportedly by her son-in-law, that's Annie's husband. Then by February 1st, 1:47 a.m., that doorbell camera disconnects. And by 2:12 a.m., camera software detects movement. That is likely the alleged abductor that was on camera. At 2:28 a.m., Nancy's pacemaker disconnects. We know her phone was found inside the home. She does not have that with her. Then on the 1st at 11:56 a.m., just before noon, family checks on Nancy. She had missed her regular church service with her friends. Her friends alerted the family that something might be wrong. And then it was only about 7 minutes of the family getting to the home before they called 911. And that was likely because that front door scene was already disturbing, with the camera gone and blood that was on the front porch confirmed to be Nancy's. By February 2nd, the news station KOLD, our sister station here in Tucson, gets the first alleged ransom note. On February 4th, the Guthries post a video asking for proof of life. On February 5th at 5 p.m., that is the first deadline that was included in the ransom note. On February 6th, KOLD gets a second note with no proof of life and no additional ransom demand. Then on February 9th, that was this Monday, 5 p.m., that was the final deadline, the second deadline that was given in that original note. At this hour, we do not know if that original ransom note is credible or not. And we thought the FBI was going to have that kind of dialed in by now. They said they were going to be using those deadlines, and they don't. February 10th, the FBI releases the suspect surveillance video. Exceptionally important, probably the biggest break in the case we had so far. Then on February 10th, later that night, a person of interest is detained and released. His name was Carlos. We all followed that. We knew he was in custody for questioning. He then talked to media after and said he didn't even know who Nancy Guthrie was, who Savannah Guthrie was, had no idea. They searched his family's home and his car. Again, released tonight. There are no other persons of interest in custody. Then yesterday, February 11th, a pair of black gloves was found. And today is February 12th, and that's kind of where this all stands. At this point, we just know there's another suspect description, but those are really the key parts in this case. And I'm watching some of the comments coming in that are interesting. One person noted, we need the audio of that 911 call from the family. I agree, that would be really important to hear on there what they had searched, what they had seen at the home, what they were saying, and their demeanor on the call. Another person saying it looked like the backpack was really heavy that he had. Maybe, what did he have in that backpack? So I am monitoring the comments live. And for that, I want to bring in our next live expert, Phil Roberts, former sergeant with Phoenix Police in the Violent Crimes Bureau, specifically assigned to extortion killings. Phil, thanks so much for joining us again. You were fantastic the other night, just in terms of understanding everything that's coming in real time. So thank you for joining us tonight.
Sure, you bet.
So first question for you is coming actually from the questions we're getting live. Somebody said, is this an inside job based on everything that we see? Is that something you can determine right now?
I don't think we can. I don't think we can determine that. That's always a possibility. And I think that's one of the first things law enforcement's looking at. So, is it possible? It absolutely is possible. And I would imagine by this time frame, the FBI has probably had multiple interviews with multiple different people, not just direct family members, but probably some indirect family members as well. So, yeah, the answer to the question, it is possible.
And I know the last time we talked to you, you had said you didn't think that kidnapping might have been the original motive here. Since that day, so it's been a couple days since we talked to you, and what's come out since, do you still believe that?
I still think, and again, I'm only operating here in a bubble of what I know. I'm sure the law enforcement, Pima County Sheriff's Department, the FBI have tons of more information they're not releasing. But just based on the number of kidnappings I worked in with the city of Phoenix, and we did over 100 kidnappings where extortion demands were made, and what's happening here in the Nancy Guthrie case, it doesn't strike me as it was very very well thought out at all. And then we can go back over that if you want, but it doesn't. It seems to be very amateurish, and with that being said, I just tend to think that there's a lot more home invasions that occur in the Tucson, Phoenix metro area than there are kidnappings. There just are. So I would tend to think that this was, I still kind of lean a little bit more towards, I think that this was going to start off to be a home invasion. I think like I said before, I think the individual knew that this was Nancy Guthrie's home, that either a landscaper or somebody cleaned out the swimming pool or something like that. And he just knew that he targeted her. I mean, the streets out there are very dark. This individual apparently knew that there were no dogs on the property, nothing that would cause a commotion or anything like that. So I think he's got some familiarity with the home. But showing up on his own, just by himself with a handgun, at least as far as we can tell, there may have been other people on the street, but the video surveillance camera is only showing one individual. It doesn't at all go with the previous kidnappings that I've investigated, and that's been over 100. Usually on the initial abduction, there's anywhere from 3 to 5 or 6 different individuals, all doing different jobs, acting as lookouts and things like that as they're inside the home. Plus the mere fact that they're inside the home, apparently, by looking at the timeline, for a period of time. And again, kidnappings are usually kind of in and out. You get your victim and you take them out right away, put them in a vehicle and drive off. And then most importantly is you take the cell phone. The cell phone's got all the information that you're going to need to do your extortion demands, and that was left there at the house. So there's a lot of things that still kind of tend for me to believe that this didn't start off to be a kidnapping. It rolled into a kidnapping. It ended up being a kidnapping. And I could give you an example of that. It would be like, let's say this was one individual or maybe another individual out in a car parked nearby, and they were going to basically ransack the home and take some money, and then realize that maybe Nancy didn't have a lot of money in the home, and some kind of an idea came up that they said, hey, let's take her to a nearby ATM machine and maybe try to take some money out that way. And then apparently if that's what happened, then apparently somewhere between taking her out of the house and getting the ATM machine, things didn't go very well.
Okay, so let's just go off of that theory that this didn't start as a kidnapping and then it turned into one. How do you then explain the ransom notes? What do you make of those? I mean, we thought at this point the FBI would have ruled them in or out, and they're still part of the investigation.
They are. I know that the FBI has already made at least one arrest. I believe it was an individual in California that was basically put up a fake extortion demand. I think that a lot of these, if not all of these, are all fake. Again, I'm just going by the kidnapping suspects that I investigated, and I would describe the kidnappers that I investigated as being professional. And they didn't operate this way. You don't leak or give your extortion demands to TMZ or to local news affiliates. You contact the family directly, and if you somehow end up leaving the victim's cell phone at home, which is just be a monumental mistake on their part, then you'd at least reach out to the local law enforcement. You contact the sheriff's department directly, or maybe even the FBI, and you try to use some kind of an encryption device or something where try to hide your location, but you wouldn't go through local news media. So again, that doesn't. I tend to think that if you're asking me directly, I think all of the extortion demands that are being received by TMZ and local news affiliates are all bogus. That's just my opinion. I could be completely wrong, but I think those are all bogus.
Do you think that due to the amount of time that there was recorded on that surveillance video of when this person got to the home and then the time that Nancy's pacemaker disconnected, do you believe she was severely hurt inside the home? What do you believe happened inside the home at that time?
Boy, that's really, I don't want to, we're just really throwing darts at a dartboard here. We really don't know. I mean, obviously there was some blood on the patio, I think near the front door that turned out to be hers. Mm-hmm. But we don't know if that was from a scratch or a nosebleed or something more serious. We just don't know.
Right.
One of the most important things, going back to the extortion demand, is there is no proof of life. And again, I have investigated over 100 extortion-related kidnappings, and I can't recall any where there was not a proof of life, where there was either a photograph taken of the victim or a short video, or the victim was placed on a telephone or something. But none of that has happened, and that really tends for me to believe that all of these extortion demands are just bogus. I mean, potentially, especially with Bitcoin and things you're dealing with nowadays, this could even be somebody in Russia, basically sending this stuff out trying to get money. And it's unfortunate, but in today's society, in the way Bitcoin is and social media and things like that, that's not a far-fetched hypothesis.
Yeah. And my last question for you, we now have seen and witnessed the FBI basically doing this investigation all over again at a lot. We know there was somebody that PCSD took into custody, then they released him. I mean, do you think there are clear missteps that are happening in this case? And is there possible tension between the FBI and PCSD with how this investigation is unfolding?
Well, that's a great question. And before I answer it, I'm going to give you exactly what I feel. Before I answer, I just want to let you know that again, I'm operating in a very small bubble. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. None of us really do, unless you're currently wearing a badge down in Pima County. No one really knows for sure. But with that being said, and based on some of the most recent news reports I've seen about potentially the Sheriff's Department holding DNA evidence back from the FBI, these are not just mistakes. I said this is kind of borderlining on monumental. I mean, I've worked with many task forces, federal task forces, and local valley authorities as well on all sorts of investigations. And you have to come into these investigations when you have partners. You have to come into them knowing that they are in fact partners. You are shoulder to shoulder. There are no secrets. You sit down in the same meeting room. You discuss everything. You listen to everybody's opinions and ideas and so forth. Now, should the Pima County Sheriff's Department be running the investigation? I think that ultimately they should be. It happened in their area. It's their jurisdiction, and they should be running it. But that doesn't mean that you exclude the FBI. The FBI should be with you shoulder to shoulder. I worked undercover narcotics with the Phoenix Police Department for a long period of time, and the Phoenix Police Department is more than capable of handling complex narcotic investigations. But oftentimes we had the DEA and the FBI working with us shoulder to shoulder because they bring in different things into the investigation. I remembered one time that we had an informant, we were looking for tunnels underneath the Nogales border at Mexico. They were smuggling drugs, and this came through the Phoenix Police Department. But we worked hand in hand with the FBI because they had certain equipment that can basically scan for tunnels under the ground, and the Phoenix Police Department didn't have anything like that. So we work with them shoulder to shoulder. But when we hear things that are coming out in the news media now, and they're detailed, it doesn't seem to be just word of mouth or second or third information. There seems to be detailed information coming out. The Pima County Sheriff's Department, and specifically they're saying Sheriff Nanos, is withholding DNA evidence from the FBI, and apparently, if it's true, shipping it out to a private laboratory in Florida and not giving it to probably the world's most premier DNA laboratory, which would be the FBI. And if that's true, that's a monumental mistake.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll see how this continues as the days go on, but certainly time being of the essence here on day 12, you have to hope that they'll be able to figure it out and work together to come together for Nancy Guthrie. So, Phil Roberts, thank you so much for joining us and for your analysis tonight, and we'll talk to you soon.
You bet.
All right, guys, after the break, a live report from Nancy Guthrie's house with our sister station, Sean Mahoney, a KOLD reporter. He's going to join us live on the show. We're going to talk about the community aspect and what we've learned just from the newsroom side of things, how unusual this case is. We'll talk to him coming up. Hi, everybody. Welcome back tonight. I want to go out live to Sean Mahoney, a KOLD reporter who is out live outside Nancy Guthrie's home tonight as the investigation continues. And just to let everybody know, you might have a little bit of a 3 to 4 second delay between me and Sean. The cell phone service and reception is really tough out by Nancy's home. So you'll hear a little bit of a delay so that they can hear us well. But Sean, you're outside the home tonight. At first and tonight, is there any investigators out there? There's obviously still a lot of media, but anything new from this evening into the night?
Yeah, nothing too crazy into the night here tonight. I mean, you can see behind me, it's a little bit hard to see. There is one sheriff's deputy squad car out there, but as we reported on, that's because the Guthrie family requested for the sheriffs to have a presence out here because of just the extensive news coverage. I mean, outside of this field of view, there is at least over a dozen cars from news outlets across the nation who are here tonight to cover day 12 of this investigation. As far as activity from law enforcement, we saw some sheriff's deputies here early in the morning. We haven't seen too much activity going on to the afternoon and evening, but still, I mean, this street has been the center of quite literally the nation as we all look for details as they come out in this story. And yeah, that continues here into the night. And I will say, from being here last week to this week, we've seen about double the amount of media coverage here by the Guthrie residents, and that's no different tonight with, like I mentioned, over a dozen news vehicles here, and even some probably out of my line of view as well.
Yeah, Sean, I noticed that too, just being there from last week into this week. When I drove by earlier today, there was probably 50 to 60 news cars. Just, I mean, the whole world has descended on Tucson for this investigation. You know, I want to talk to you about kind of the behind the scenes for your newsroom and just in general. KLD was the station, the Tucson station, that received these two notes, these alleged ransom notes from this alleged abductor. And again, we don't know if these are legitimate. Still, 12 days into this, we still don't know if these are legit or not. But something that I've found reporting on this, and I want to get your kind of behind the scenes take on it. You know, typically when there's an investigation, high profile case, we're seeing updates, we're posting the updates. But this case, more than anything else I've noticed, it's like every tiny tidbit, even if it's just a deputy that's out there. People in the public want every movement. They want to know every possible, you know, blink of an eye from each deputy, from an FBI agent. I mean, it can be a small update, but it seems that the public feels that that is exceptionally important. It's been hard to keep up with, and I know that there's this appetite that people want this constantly, but from your perspective, the way that your newsroom has handled this and kind of digested it and then tried to, you know, put your resources out wherever you can to cover everything in real time, what's that been like for you personally and your station personally?
I mean, it goes without saying, it can be a little exhausting. I mean, we're in day 12 of this search, and like you mentioned, I mean, this case is unlike any that we've ever seen before. And I worked back in Charleston at a previous job for the Murdaugh murder saga, and that was its own media frenzy in and of itself. But I think this is just unlike anything we've ever seen because, like you said, we don't have all the details, and every little piece of detail the public, not only here in Tucson but around the world, wants to know because we're all searching for answers. And from a news perspective, right, you have to think our whole newsroom, this is a all hands on deck situation. And obviously, like you mentioned, I mean, you never want to become the story, but obviously with some of the notes that were sent into our newsroom, we KLD specifically got kind of put into the story, and that's something that we didn't take lightly, and something that why we've put so much effort into going to every little detail. I mean, we have crews here from morning to during the day to nights. I mean, we've practically had someone outside of the Guthrie residence for about 20 to 24 of the 24 hours a day for the past 12 days. And like you mentioned, it's because of the fact that there are so many people who want to know all these little updates. And a lot of these little updates that we're talking about, whether it's a deputy outside of Guthrie's home or when you go to Andy Guthrie's house, the activity there. I mean, a little update can be a huge break, and we've seen it with some of the evidence that has been recovered. We've seen it in some of the notes that have been sent out by the FBI. I mean, every little detail, people are tuning in to find those out because one detail can be the case, the piece of evidence or the factor that breaks this case wide open, and everyone wants to, you know, be there or be aware of it when it happens.
Yeah, you're completely right. And also part of the problem is that PCSD and the FBI hasn't held a press conference for an entire week. So this leaves people guessing even more about the mystery of what's going on and wanting that update as well. One more question before we let you go. Just from the community emotional side of this story, we focus so much on the investigative updates, but you know, Savannah Guthrie, co-host of the Today Show, posting another video today, a heartbreaking video of her and her siblings as kids with their mom, you know, the hashtag bring her home. But I know that neighbors have also been sending yellow flowers or more flowers to the Guthrie home and also putting out yellow ribbons in support. Can you just talk about the growing kind of a show of support, flowers there that has grown in the last couple days?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. It's actually what we're focusing some of our reports on here tonight. When this whole thing started, I mean, we saw a lot of the neighbors in the community reacting. And we started there for the first day or two and just hearing about one of their neighbors, this happening to someone so close to them. And as the story has grown and grown, you've seen more and more people from outside of the outskirts of the Catalina Foothills to the entire city of Tucson trying to find a way to show their support. And you mentioned the color yellow too, because I don't know if a lot of people know this, but yellow is the symbol for hope, specifically when it comes to flowers. And we talked with a resident. I mean, there were people out here from Chandler today, a group of about 12 ladies who had come to drop off yellow ribbons and flowers. There's a local flower shop, a Casa Adobes flower shop, that has been assigned by the HOA to take in orders from the community, and they've been getting orders from across the nation of people trying to send flowers. I mean, the scene, it's kind of hard to see behind me, but there is more than a dozen, or I would say upwards of 20 bouquets of flowers out there, which has grown. This past weekend, there was only a candle or maybe one bouquet of flowers, and you could see the support growing day by day as more people, they're just trying to find any way to show support. And it's like, for a lot of people, you mentioned Guthrie's posting on social media. I mean, a lot of people, you can't reach out to the Guthrie family and tell them yourself. And this is the next best thing. And the one key message that I've heard from a lot of people is not only are they sending these flowers out as a show of support, but they're hoping that this scene that we've seen grow over the past few days and this tribute and show of support for Nancy, they're hoping that Nancy will get to see it. And I think that's what's most powerful about this, is that it's not just something that they're doing to show support now, but they're hoping that if Nancy can be found safe, that she will get to witness this firsthand. And it's just so powerful seeing just not only the people from local Tucson community, but across the nation trying to show support on the ground here at the Guthrie residence.
Yeah, it's not a memorial, it's a show of support. Sean Mahoney, KLD reporter, thank you so much for the live report from the scene. Appreciate your incredible reporting. I know it's a lot of work out there, so thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys, thank you so much for joining True Crime AZ Live tonight. You know, the big news coming out today, an $100,000 reward now from the FBI, and that new suspect description, 5'9" or 5'10" average build with this Ozark backpack. Again, if you know anything about this case, please call in tips. You can now submit them online to an evidence portal through PCSD, or you can call 1-800-CALL-FBI. They need your help. They need to bring Nancy home. And I know just from the totality of this investigation, there's so much coming out in rapid time. But at the end of the day, this is the Guthrie family. This is Savannah's mom. And her posting that video today really just kind of brought home the emotional aspect, the family aspect of what we're dealing with tonight. So again, day 12 of searching for Nancy Guthrie. We'll be staying on this case in the coming days, in the coming weeks. We obviously hope that with all the new information, there's a break in the case soon that would lead to the arrest of the person who abducted Nancy Guthrie. And most importantly, the hope and goal is to find Nancy Guthrie and find Nancy Guthrie alive. Thank you so much for joining True Crime AZ Live. You can follow me on social media at Brianna Whitney, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. We're going to be posting updates in real time as they happen. I hope everybody has a safe night and appreciate you guys so much for joining us. Thanks so much.